welcome back to another edition of the Stogie Review video review. And well, this week, just like I said I might do last week, I decided to go with the Nestor Miranda special selection. And this is a product of Nestor Miranda, of course, since his name is on the band. And it's distributed by his company, Miami Cigar Company. And from what I understand, I was doing a little bit of digging around, and the information on this cigar is a little tough to come by. There really is no mention of this cigar on Miami Cigar's website, and the two big retailers, I should say, have conflicting information. You know, Cigars International says one thing, Famous says another. One says it's mostly Honduran tobacco, the other says it's Nicaraguan binder, Nicaraguan filler, Nicaraguan and Costa Rican filler, you know, while the other's saying, oh, it's primarily Honduran. So finding information is kind of tough. I was able to pick out just a little bit of information from Tom, our friend over at Keepers of the Flame, and a little interesting tidbit about this cigar, which I guess you would assume due to the name, is that this is Nestor Miranda's personal cigar. It's one that he used to reserve for himself, family, and co-workers and special guests and whatnot. And they decided to release the blend. Now, you know, referring back to the two big retailers, it seems that this is available in two varieties. There's a Rosado wrapper and an Oscuro wrapper. This is the Rosado, and they're available in three sizes: a Robusto Grande, which is this one, and a Super Toro, which is a 6x60. And at the show in Vegas, they debuted a new Lancero size, a 38x7. So the variety of cigars is kind of small, and availability seems to be decent, and you can get them at a couple of online retailers, and your local cigar shop carries them. So with that said, I mean, there really isn't a ton of information to give you, because it's very difficult to come across this stuff, it seems. Now, what I would have liked to have done was contact the manufacturer earlier on, but I decided to do this last minute, and I really can't wait. So we're just kind of going to wing the information that we've got. One of the things I do remember from the trade show was that I was talking to Jose Blanco in his booth, and I asked him if he made the cigar. It happened to be sitting in an ashtray in his booth, and he said, no, that's Nestor Miranda's cigar. It's made in Honduras. So I do remember that he mentioned that it was made in Honduras. So it's going to retail for about $5.50. As I mentioned, if you listen to Famous, it's got a Nicaraguan Rosado wrapper, Nicaraguan binder, and Nicaraguan Costa Rican filler. If you listen to the other, it's mostly Honduran. So really, your guess is as good as mine at this point. So I'm going to go ahead and get the cigar opened up first and foremost, and I've got a little bit of bad news. My absolute favorite cutter is no more. My Zycar cigar scissors. There's two little, what look like bars across the back that keep the blades from, well, actually that stop the blades. Well, this one broke off, so essentially when I'm cutting my cigar, you know, cutting my cigar, one hits the stop, the other keeps going, so they're useless to me. I'm going to ship them back to Zycar, and hopefully everything will work out, and I'm going to try to keep a little journal of how that goes, and we'll put together a post on the warranty service of Zycar. So hopefully they won't get a heads up by watching this video, but if they do, my cutter's coming, guys. But I do have the backup polio, and I'm going to go ahead and get to work. The pre-light draw is very loose. I'm not getting much in terms of flavor, just a lot of air. See, it feels a little too loose, but we'll see how it goes once it's lit. It's got it's like a little bit of a sweet flavor to it. It's sort of fruity. The wrapper color is consistent. It's got a very nice oily sheen to it. I'm not getting much variation in terms of color, as I mentioned. There's a handful of veins running through the wrapper leaf, most of which are fairly small. They don't protrude much. They don't give it a coarse feel at all. Cigar feels pretty firm head to foot. I mean, getting a little bit of a soft spot above the band, and that's about it. Aside from that, it feels pretty good. The foot looks a little compacted. I'm kind of surprised that I'm getting as loose a draw as I am by looking at the foot. I kind of figured it was going to be a little snug, but it's going well so far. A little surprising. There isn't really much of an aroma on the wrapper. It's just very mild. The foot's got like a compost aroma to it. And I picked these up locally at my local cigar shop. I do have one of the Lanceros from the show, but I've had probably 6 or 8 of these from my local shop, so I figured I'd just stick with the one I was familiar with and smoke, that one. As I mentioned, I picked them up for about $5.50, and we'll discuss more what I think about it as we go. But in the meantime, I'm going to get my cigar lit, get everything on the back end moving along, and I'll be back. We'll kick things off with the first third and see how it goes. So sit tight. Well, we're about 30 minutes into this cigar now, and well, the burn's being a little finicky on me. The burn line itself is fairly heavy, really dark and oily. It would look great if it was thin, but being a little heavy, it sort of gives it that little bit of a blistered appearance. The ash just was fairly dark in color. It lasted about 3/4 of an inch before it just kind of plopped in front of me on the table. And when it landed, it broke open a little bit, and I was just kind of poking around at the filler and decided that I was going to kind of mash it up in my hand and look and see, and compare the dark ash of the wrapper to the light ash of the filler. And as it turns out, the filler was very light. Not quite white, but it was very light in color, and the outside ash, the wrapper, is very dark. Whether that means anything, I really don't know. I just took it upon myself to check it out when the opportunity arose. In terms of flavor, I'm not getting much. The one thing that I have tasted from until I lit the cigar until now is sort of like a savory sort of flavor. It hasn't built at all from when I lit it, and I'm not picking up any subtleties, any changes. It's been very one-dimensional up until this point. The body's medium. Nothing really stands out there either. The most enjoyable part of the cigar has been the finish. It is very soft on the palate. It's very creamy. And it lasts for a few minutes. After you take a good puff of the cigar, let the smoke out, get it through your sinuses and whatnot. Just give it a second or two, and then it sort of washes over you and leaves you with this like a thinned out syrup sort of flavor, or sort of texture, I should say. And it's very enjoyable. But in terms of flavor, it's just it's very one-dimensional, and it kind of surprised me. I was really expecting more. With the cold draw being a little fruity and the aroma at the foot having sort of a compost-like aroma to it, I thought there was going to be an interesting dynamic there, but I'm not picking up either one in the flavors of the cigar. So up until this point, it's just been enjoyable. I like the finish, but I'm not getting a whole lot in terms of flavor. So I'm going to stick with it. I'll be back for the second third and see if anything changes. Well, it's going on an hour now, and I'm still plugging along. Just about through the second third of my Nestor Miranda special selection, and I'm getting a whole lot more of the first third. There really hasn't been any change across the board. The body's still, firmly seated in the medium range. The finish is just as creamy as it was before. It's just as pleasant. It lasts a minute or two before it fades. It's very enjoyable. And in terms of flavor, I'm still getting this savory sort of flavor that's been very one-dimensional. I've got a little bit of an elevated burn rate, and what I mean by that is I've got to keep puffing on the cigar to keep it lit. So if I were to take the cigar and just sit it down in the ashtray and let it sit for a minute or two like you normally do, when I pick it up and take the first puff, I'm not going to get hardly any smoke. I've got to take 3, 4, maybe 5 good puffs on it before I get a mouthful of smoke. So the cigar is sort of smoldering and going out. So what I need to do is take lots of little puffs more frequently than I normally would, about twice as often as I normally would, which is why I'm getting the impression that I'm really moving along with this cigar. About an hour into it, I don't know, I guess realistically this is about where I should be, but knowing my tendencies, I think that I should have quite a bit more cigar here in my hand. But it's not becoming a big problem. On occasion, a cigar is getting a little warm on the fingers and on the palate, and what it's doing is it's making the smoke taste a little bitter. But if I just hold off on taking a puff for, I don't know, a few extra seconds, it cools down and the flavors go back to normal. So it's just this occasional little bit of bitterness that pops up, and that's from me puffing on it quite a bit just to keep it lit. And when the flavors go back to that savory sort of flavor, it's not a bad cigar. I mean, it's a decent flavor. It's just very one-dimensional, and I really expected more from it. As I mentioned before, from the aroma and the wrapper and the foot. I really thought I was in for something a little different than what it is. The ash is very dark. In the center is still very light. The burn line itself is still fairly thick, although it is a little thinner than it was originally. It's still a little wavy, a little problematic, but I haven't had to touch it up or correct it. Just rotating it and just puffing on it more in general seems to keep it fairly in line. It's not getting very erratic, but it's enough to grab my attention. So at this point, there really isn't much to report on the cigar. It's just a whole lot more of the first third with the mention of the elevated burn rate. So with that said, I'll be back one more time. We'll do final third, wrap up the cigar, and I'll let you be on your way. Like that. It's almost out. And it's a little warm, and that's pretty much what I have to do every time I let it sit just a second too long. It's been about an hour and 45 minutes total, and I popped the band off, which came off very easily, and I'm plugging right along. And I feel like I'm sounding like a broken record. This third is not much different from the other two. There was a slight progression in body. It's a little more towards medium to full now, but it was a very little transition. I guess it could have been hard to miss, but really there was just so little going on that it just kind of stood out. It was just a small transition. Finish is the same. It's very creamy, easy on the palate, very pleasant. By far the most enjoyable part of the cigar, I think. In the flavor department, it's more or less the same. It's sort of a savory flavor. The only difference now is I'm starting to get this sort of like a mesquite flavor, and it comes and goes, and it's fairly mild in the background and whatnot. But I really expected a little bit more, and I know I said that before because of the aromas and everything else. But you know, this cigar's been very one-dimensional, very consistent throughout. And for some people, that's going to be exactly what they're looking for. Personally, I like change throughout the cigar. You know, it doesn't have to be a big, drastic change, but some sort of change to keep my attention, to keep me, I don't know, interested, and keep me occupied. You know, it's been very steady and consistent throughout. Cigar's getting a little warm more often now. The cigar wants to go out more frequently than it did before, so I find myself constantly picking it up and puffing on it. Otherwise, it goes out like it did at the end of the last clip. And one thing about the smoke now is that it's beginning to turn very pungent, and the resting smoke, that is. It's a little harsh on the eyes. It sort of takes your breath away. I get the sudden urge to dodge the smoke every time I take a puff. I can see this being very offensive in close quarters, well, I'm in close quarters, but if I were sitting around with a couple of guys, I'm sure that it would begin to get a little offensive. You know, that pungent aroma sort of wafts by you. It's really going to grab your attention. Really, I think I'm just about done with the cigar now. And I mentioned earlier that I smoked about 6 or 8 of these by now, and you know, it was in a different situation. I might have smoked 1 or 2 at home, but never in the situation where I was focused on the cigar, sitting down, taking lots of notes. Usually, if I'm around the house, I might be outside getting the grill ready or cooking or whatnot, and I keep a small notepad near me most of the time. So you know, I'll pick the notepad up, jot down a few notes, and that's really the extent of this cigar. All the other ones I've had were at the cigar shop. I've purchased them right then and there and lit them up. And the thing there is, when I'm relaxing with the guys and talking with them and whatnot, the cigar stays in my hand pretty much the entire time. If it's in the ashtray, I put it in the ashtray while I get up to go grab something to drink or use the restroom. And that's about the only time it leaves my hand. So I have a tendency to smoke the cigars faster in more of a social situation. So that's probably why I haven't noticed the problem with the cigar going out before. Because, you know, I'm puffing on it a lot more often than I would be now, where I'm analyzing the cigar, taking notes, trying to do a couple of things at one time and focus the review, rather than just sort of kicking back and puffing on the cigar. But as far as whether or not I'd recommend it, to be honest with you, I'll probably buy more of them. But it's one of the cigars where I'm going to buy it just to smoke it at the cigar shop, to not really focus too much on it, because it's very consistent and I think it's one-dimensional. So in a situation where you're just kicking back with the guy smoking cigars, you know, I think it's a decent cigar for that situation. But when you're sitting back by yourself trying to really enjoy the cigar, I just don't think there's enough there to keep my interest. So if I buy them again, it's just going to be to sit around with the guys and and smoke at the cigar shop. So really, that's all I have for you for the Nestor Miranda special selection. Now, as far as what I'm going to review next week, I don't know, to be honest with you. This was actually a second choice. I was going to smoke the Casa Fernandez tonight, but it turns out there's very little information available on that as well. So I was looking at another backup cigar when I just figured, I'm going to bite the bullet and just scour the internet quickly and try to find some information on this one. And this is what I ended up smoking. So as far as what I'm going to be smoking next week, possibly the Casa Fernandez. I've got to make a phone call or two and see if I can get some information on that cigar, because I don't want to leave the brand information blank. Possibly the old school cigar I picked up from IPCPR, which will more or less be a first impression review. I've only got the one, and I was kind of interested in smoking it. It's Puro of some sort. I don't remember where it comes from, but it's different from anything I've ever smoked before, because it was one of those countries where I wouldn't have expected an entire cigar to come from. So that ought to be interesting. That's on the list of things to do. When I was in Vegas, I talked to Justin from Las Vegas TV, and he gave me some Reyes samples that I really need to get to as well. So that's sort of what's on the chopping block, either the Casa Fernandez, the old school cigar, or one of the Reyes family lines. So just like this time, I'll try to drop a comment if I deviate from something, or keep an eye on the forums, and I usually drop a note as to what I'm going to be smoking in the "What Are You Smoking" section, because generally I'm smoking cigars and I'm gearing up the review and whatnot. So until next week, happy smoking. Oh, and don't forget to enter the contest for September to give Stogie Review a new tagline. You'll have the opportunity to win a box of Rocky Patel Nording Robustos, courtesy of Duke City Cigars. So leave us a comment. You can enter one comment per person per day. So you can enter every day through the rest of the month. Give us a new tagline, and Jerry, Brian, and I will select a winner, and you'll get a free box of cigars courtesy of Duke City Cigars. So anyway, this time I mean it. Until next week, happy smoking.